I first of all would like to mention that I will be chairing this meeting today. Mr. McCrinnan is unavailable due to very unfortunate circumstances. I've only been vice chair for 1 week, and I'll be chairing today, and it's my first time doing it, so let's all be patient here today. And I'll do my best, I promise. Welcome to meeting number 74 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. We will start by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is an earpiece worn too close to a microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise a high degree of caution when handling the earpieces, especially when your microphone or your neighbor's microphone is turned off. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of the interpreters, I invite participants to ensure that they speak into the microphone into which their headset is plugged in, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table, away from the microphone when they are not in use. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And with that, we left off last week, and hopefully everybody had a good long weekend with debate that was going on. And it's okay, can I just read this? I will read where we left off just to remind everybody, if that's okay. I do have the exact verbiage here. The chair quotes, "That's what we're probably going to have to do." And then the chair of the day stated, "Unless we can vote on what we have now and then move a motion, I think we have to adjourn, and we will resume at this point in the debate and begin again on this matter when we resume on Wednesday. With that understanding, we are adjourned." So we will start off with where we were, and I'll go to Mr. Lloyd. Oops, point of order, yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking this on as well, and I promise to be as well behaved as possible during this committee. Just wanted to know who you have on the speaking order.
We have the list from Wednesday?
The list was done. We didn't have anybody.
Oh, we don't have an ongoing list from Wednesday, is what I'm just being informed by the clerk.
Okay.
We had the floor, sorry, I don't know how I word that. The opposition had the floor at the time, and that's where we're going to continue on from there, as per.
Now the clerk will be taking a speaking list.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Lloyd? Oh, there's more points, sorry?
No, I was added to the...
Oh, just adding yourself? Okay, you're getting all the names down?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Lloyd?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And given that we were left off on a sub-amendment, and over the time we've had to review this over the weekend, there have been discussions, and I think we will find support for a sub-amendment, which I will be reading into the record now, and which should be distributed to the committee in both official languages. So I'll read that into the record now. That the committee hold a 3-hour meeting immediately after the committee study of Bill C-20 on the right of crime victims and the security reclassification and transfer of offenders within federal corrections, and the transfer of Paul Bernardo from a maximum security prison to a medium security prison, and that the committee invite the Minister of Public Safety, Commissioner of Correctional Service Canada Ann Kelly, Deputy Minister Sean Tupper, the Corrections Investigator, and the Federal Victims Ombudsperson, representatives of the victims' families, particularly Tim Danson, and officials of justice and public safety to appear. I think we've hit on what I think we've hit on a good compromise here, Mr. Chair. And so I think we've, it's always been the conservative position that we need to have some sort of representation from victims' perspective or victims' representatives' perspective in order to see this from all angles so that we can ensure that this event, that we can at least recommend some changes so that hopefully an event like this doesn't happen again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. The clerk has indicated that he is sent out in both official languages. Everybody has that in writing. Can I just confirm a couple of nods around the table that we do have that? Or should I wait a minute? We have that? Okay. Yep. Now that
Point
all
of order.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. O'Connell.
Sir, I'd just like to get clarification that this is actually an order and not just a notice of motion, because where we left off, we adjourned the meeting. So this is a motion, not a sub-amendment. So I'd like to get clarification if this is actually an order, given that we adjourned, and now this would be the first time it's introduced, which would require notice because it wasn't part before we adjourned the meeting. And this meeting was called for C20. That's what the agenda was put out for. It wasn't a continuation of the last meeting. So I just question if this is actually an order without notice.
On the point of order, Chair, if I may. It seems like the member is questioning whether it was in order to resume consideration of debate on the motion, which I would have some separate points to make. But once debate has resumed on the motion, debate is underway on the motion, and it is, of course, in order for somebody to move an amendment, a sub-amendment to the motion. There's no requirement to provide notice to amend an item that is on the table being debated. And this motion was on the table. You said it was on the table and gave the floor to my colleague, and he used the floor to then move an amendment. So I think that is procedurally pretty clear. Thanks.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order. I appreciate the clarification of my colleague, Mr. Genuis, but I think it's up to the chair to respond to Mrs. O'Connell with the recommendations of the clerk. And I would like to have an estimate, a time estimate, if we're going to debate this for a long time, because officials last week waited for 2 hours. Out of respect for them, if we're going to debate this for a long time, perhaps we should let them know. I imagine they have better things to do than to watch us debating this.
Thank you, and thank you for those points of order. It is, I have been instructed by the clerk that it is in order, and we will carry on with this that's on the floor right now. We will continue then with Mr. Julian.
Sorry, I had indicated to the chair to be on the list second.
I've been given the list by the clerk, and you were next after Mr. Julian.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is different than what we've spoken about offline. I think the intention, hopefully, here is to move forward with C20. I mean, we've had the witnesses now here twice, and we thank you very much for coming. It's the time to get to this important legislation. I think there may be the seed of a solution to the filibuster that we saw a few days ago. But one of the things that I had indicated very clearly is that I felt that the Minister of Public Safety should be coming before this committee to discuss this issue, but also a range of other issues. And so I actually think that the sub-amendment is less helpful because what we actually are talking about is a 3-hour meeting with so many witnesses that we can't have the ability to question the Minister of Public Safety in the way that I certainly would like to see, not only on this issue, but on a range of public safety issues. He's a new minister. I know he's eager to come to committee. There's a whole range of questions we're going to be asking him. And so I had flagged and I had thought that we had some consensus around this. The Minister of Public Safety would be invited with his officials as part of a separate meeting. Alors, je pourrais pas vraiment l'appuyer.
So I cannot really, I can't really support this the way it's written out because of that, especially given that the minister, in my opinion, should come for 2 hours. With all the departmental employees to respond to questions. But if we're able to in the following minutes, and I agree with Mrs. Michaud, we don't want, once again, to have the officials waiting while we're discussing this motion, rather than going to a clause-by-clause of C20. So I hope that we can find a quick solution to this motion that is constructed, well, that isn't exactly as what I understood would be presented to the committee.
Ms. O'Connell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we now proceed to clause by clause on C20. It's a dilatory motion. There's no debate. We can come back to this if we have agreement later, but we are here for C20, so.
Chair, would it be possible to request a brief suspension?
Sorry, there's a motion on the floor,
I know.
and there's no debate.
I was.
I think we're going to have to go to a vote by
Okay.
what the clerk's telling me, so we will call the vote. All those, are we going to do verbal? Recorded vote? Mr. Clerk?
Yes. So, Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Mr. MacDonald, Monsieur Chiffquet,
Oui.
Mr. Gay,
In favor?
Mr. Biddle,
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd,
No.
Miss Ferrari,
No.
Mr. Motz,
No.
Madame Michaud. Someone's missing.
En faveur.
Um,
4.
So, defeated 7 in favor, 3 against. So we go to C20. You should suspend for having been brief.
Okay, the clerk and I discussed this before we were going to go ahead. If we could just have a short recess where we can get set up for C20, no more than 5 minutes, please. the score once we get going. Feel free. The Blue Jays are on at 4:30. I see a thumbs up from the back of the room. So thank you, everyone. I would just like to now introduce, and thank you very much to the witnesses. Mr. Jenius?
Sorry, yeah. May I have the floor? Thank you. I'd like to move that the committee not proceed with clause by clause on Bill C-20 until it has disposed of the motion respecting the Paul Bernardo transfer and the invitation to representatives of the victims' families. Chair, I am gravely concerned about what has just taken place and what we see happening in this country in general. It would seem at a minimum level of reasonableness that the Public Safety Committee would be able to have one meeting.
Point
We're
of
not
order.
talking about multiple meetings. We're talking about one meeting
order.
to hear from the families of victims
order.
of Paul
Just
Bernardo.
one moment, please. Point of order.
Mr. Chair, I would ask to see if this is in order. It's a direct conflict of the motion that was just passed.
Let me check on that.
Chair, if I can maybe just speak to the point of order as you're deliberating. Thank you.
Through discussions with the clerk, we did leave off last time in a very precarious motion or area, and I do know that the clerk of that day did want to carry on, so it is my decision to make, and I will hear you. Just, Mr. Jenius, carry on.
Thank you.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair. Are you ruling that his motion is in order?
Did you want me to speak to the point of
No,
order?
I have the floor. I've asked a question of the chair, not to you. Mr.
point-
Chair,
point-
are you
point of
ruling?
order, Chair.
Excuse me, do I have the floor, Mr. Chair?
Mr.
Thanks.
Connell, go ahead.
I'm asking, did you rule that that motion is in order?
I have ruled that I will hear Mr. Jenius because I did get
but
some information.
sorry,
May I speak? I did get confirmation from the clerk that the final decision is up to me,
Okay.
and I'm making that decision right now to hear Mr. Jenius.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I'd like to challenge the chair on your ruling.
Sorry, just point of order. He hasn't made a ruling yet. He's inviting. I think he was inviting me to comment on the point of order before he was making a ruling.
Mr.
he
Chair, I've
hasn't made
just
a ruling.
asked if you ruled on his motion.
I ruled to let him speak.
Sorry, I wasn't finished with my question. He made a motion and then began to speak
Point of
to
order,
the motion.
Chair. You don't have to let her finish. You are the chair of the committee, and she is under
Sorry,
the
Mr.
impression
Chair,
that she
who
is
has
the
the
chair of the
floor?
committee. It seems.
One at a time, everybody. I said at the beginning, let's
Who has
try and get through
floor?
this. I do right now, Miss O'Connell. I do.
Sure. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm not done talking. I'll give you that when you're done.
Sure.
So we have gone back and forth with points of order. I have heard yours, Miss O'Connell. Mr. Jenius did mention he had a point of order. Mr. Jenius, what is your point of order?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to comment on the rules that govern whether motions are in order or not, because Ms.
Point of
O'Connell
order.
said that my motion was not in
of
order.
order.
I believe
Miss O'Connell, I'm gonna-
that
let's
it
do this
is.
Point of order first, then I'll come back to you.
Yeah. It's a well-established rule of committees that if a motion is on the matter at hand, notice is not required. Any motion can be moved on the matter at hand, provided that there is not another motion on the floor. There was no other motion on the floor. The matter at hand was what it was, and I moved a motion in accordance with that matter at hand. Furthermore, there is no direct conflict with the motion that was previously adjourned. But you can, even still, you can propose to resume consideration of a previously adjourned motion, provided that something has happened in between. But in any event, that's not what my motion was. I wonder maybe if the clerk can provide some more clarity on the issue of of matter at hand to the committee that might be helpful for Ms. O'Connell to understand kind of how these things are typically adjudicated.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. O'Connell. It's not appropriate for the clerk to be part of the debate. Go ahead, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked the question of whether or not you ruled on if the motion was in order. The motion was read, and then Mr. Janice began debate. And I recognize if you want to hear his debate, but that was not my question. I question if the motion is in order, and he finished his motion and began debate. So I'm asking if his motion, as read, was in order.
Which, according to the clerk, through his information to me, because I'm not an expert, Ms. O'Connell, that yes, I have the right to make that as being in order.
Thank you. So then, with that, I challenge the chair.
So we go to a vote on that.
Mr. Chair, before the vote, can you have the clerk clarify if you support the challenge, the vote is yes, is that correct? If you don't support the challenge
Just
of the
a
chair,
point of
or is
order,
it
the member moves
ruling?
a dilatory motion and then wants to debate it further.
No, I'm asking a clarification that the clerk can provide clarification for the vote.
Maybe the member should have sought clarification about whether it's in
Mr.
order.
Janice, just a moment,
She
please.
appears to be confident she knows the rules better than the chair and the clerk.
Just because you're sad that you
Folks,
lost the vote,
I'm not sad
you
at
don't
all.
have to be
Everybody, let's
insulting.
keep
Vote hasn't
order
even
here.
taken place yet.
Please, let's get through this as amicably and as best as we can. Ms. O'Connell, you had the floor. Are you finished?
I just asked for that the clerk can do the clarification that happens in most committees when a challenge of the chair vote comes, that you clarify for all members that what the challenge is that it's of your ruling. So if you support the chair's ruling, you would vote
Thank
yes.
you.
If you don't support the chair's ruling,
We will get the
you
clerk
vote no.
to justify
Thank
that.
you.
Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
So for answering Ms. O'Connell, we return to the matter at hand. So the item on the agenda that was decided by the committee to deal with. So it would mean that we come back to clause by clause of C20 at the end of a decision.
No, it's just so that everyone
I understand, yeah. Mis- What
Against
does a
the-
vote yes mean and what does a vote no mean? What are you voting yes to and no to? If you could just clarify that, not where we're going after that, but clarify.
So right now it is a motion to challenge the ruling of the chair that the motion is in order. So if the motion is adopted, we return to the item that was decided by the committee to deal with, so which is clause by clause of C20. And if it's if the motion is defeated, it's we return to the previous question.
Point d'ordre, monsieur. J'ai
Ms.
juste
Michaud?
Point of order. So if we vote no, it means what does it mean if we vote yes, and what does it mean if we vote no? I think that's what we need. If the answer is no, we'll pursue the debate on the motion presented on returning.
Sorry, if you vote no,
Wait,
it means you
Ms.
do not
I
support.
will recognize
Okay.
you first. If someone votes yes, are they agreeing with Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
That, so voting no is agreeing with Ms. O'Connell?
Point of order. This is why I
Yeah,
thank you. Do I have
go
a
ahead,
floor?
yield the floor.
This is why I asked for this, because it's a reverse order motion, and every committee always has this issue. If you vote yes, it means you're supporting the chair's ruling. If you vote no, it means you are not supporting the chair's ruling, and then, as the clerk said, would go back to C20.
Yeah, so point of
Is everybody
order,
clear
Mr.
on
Chair.
that? I'm clear now. Mr. Julian,
Yeah,
go ahead.
so the question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Right. So if we're supporting the chair's decision, we would vote yes.
Yes.
If we are not sustaining the chair's decision, we would vote no.
Correct. Is everybody clear on that now? We're good? Did I hear a recorded division or recorded division, Mr. Clerk?
Ms. O'Connell?
No.
Mr. MacDonald? No. Mr. Gaillard?
Against?
Mr. Biddle?
No.
Mr. Shifke?
No.
Mr. Lord?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Generous?
Yes.
Ms. Michaud? Madame Michaud?
Contre.
Monsieur Julien?
No, contre.
Donc 7 contre, 3 pour, 7 against, 3 for.
Chair.
Mr. Jenius?
Thank you. I move that the committee not proceed any further with clause by clause on Bill 20, C20. And the reason I'm moving that motion at this time is because I do not think we should proceed with clause by clause on this bill until the matter previously before the committee is disposed of. That matter is the
Point of order?
desire of this committee on our side
Point of
to
order?
allow victims
Jenius, just one moment,
of
please. Point of order,
and
Mr.
family
Tom.
members of Mr. Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, the members opposite don't recognize that it's actually not appropriate to introduce the same motion that we've now voted on effectively twice.
On the same point of order, Chair.
Just one moment, please, Mr. Jenius.
Thank you.
Agree. Mr. Jenius, I believe the committee has already made their decision on this matter.
No, it hasn't, Chair. But
Well,
can
we
I
just had a vote on that.
can I
so
raise a point of order, Chair?
You can raise a point of order.
So a couple points. The motion that I previously put forward was through the committee's decision, deemed not in order. No reason was provided by the member presenting the challenge as to why it wouldn't be in order. But I have in any event presented a completely different motion, which if the previous motion wasn't in order, this motion certainly is in order. Because it doesn't make mention of any other issues. It says simply the matter at hand is a consideration of clause by clause on Bill C-20, and the motion that I've moved is that the committee not proceed any further with clause by clause on Bill C-20. It is entirely implausible that that motion would be
Point of order?
out of order, and it is
Point of order?
substantially different from the previous motion that was on
Give me
that was on the
one
table.
more minute there,
So-
Mr. Jenius. Ms. O'Connell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe you ruled the motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you ruled the motion was not in order. Is the member opposite challenging your ruling?
I don't believe he is. I'm just going to hear him out here. He says he has a different motion.
Yeah, I'm moving a different motion, which if I have the floor again, just to be clear, I am moving the motion that the committee not proceed any further with clause by clause of Bill C-20. That is the motion that I'm moving, and I don't think that that any plausible reading of the rules would find that out of order, given that it is on the matter being considered quite directly. It doesn't reference any other matters, and so I'll proceed to speak to it. The
Point of order?
previous discussion
Well,
at the
he can't
committee.
continue to
dealt with-
filibuster
Sorry,
while
Mr.
you're
Jenius, just give
consulting
me
the
one
clerk.
moment.
Okay, no, that's totally fine,
Just
Chair.
speak with the clerk.
No problem.
Mr. Jenius, I'm being instructed by the clerk on his savvy advice that we've already discussed that matter and your motion is not in order.
Okay, Chair, I will move that the committee report to the House that we have reached an impasse about studying the transfer of Paul Bernardo to medium security, and that the Chair inform the House that as a result, the consideration of Bill C-20 will be delayed. That motion is, I think, an important one in a context where this committee should be willing to have one meeting to hear about the transfer of Paul Bernardo. We have victims' families that want to be heard on this matter. We want to have one meeting to allow victims' family. It is debate. Yeah, I just moved a motion, so I'm now engaging in debate. We have victims' families that want to be heard
Point of
at
order,
this
Mr.
committee, that want to be heard in one meeting, and Liberals
But you have to
are
stop him.
insisting
Mr. Jenius, can you
that
just hold on one
they
moment
will
again? Mr. Jenius?
do anything to
Mr.
prevent these
Jenius? Just hold your thoughts for one moment. Ms. O'Connell, can you just give us 1 minute here?
Yes, it's just as long as the point of order
Yeah,
is
we're just-
recognized. Thank you.
We've got a little huddle going on beside us. We'll figure
Fair
this
enough.
out.
That's fine.
Mr. Garnett? Mr. Jenius, I'm sorry. That may stick. Would you order everyone, please? Would you be able to provide myself and the clerk with that in writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the text right here, so I'll just, I mean, I could read it again, but I can certainly email it to you as well.
I have a point of order.
Go ahead, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two issues here. One, I'd like you to confer with the clerk if this motion is in order. One, again, we've debated or we voted on the issue at hand. And number two, I would argue that the motion is out of order because it refers to reporting back to the House, although the motion itself is not on a study or a meeting on the subject matter as the last debate or the last motion was moved on. Therefore, the subject matter that we are currently on is C20, and you would need to report back only on a study. So I would argue that his motion is out of order on two fronts.
On the same point of order,
Thank you
Chair, I
for
can
that.
maybe provide some clarification on the precedent here. There are many committees that, in the context of their studies of legislation, also provide substantive comments on issues related to the legislation. I've been on at least two committees that have done this. And the cases where sometimes, for instance, an issue is raised in the context of study of a particular bill that is ultimately deemed out of order as an amendment to the bill because it goes beyond the scope, but the committee still wishes to report to the House on what it has learned in the context of the study and maybe make recommendations for broader consideration. Also, you have committees reporting to the House requesting an expansion of scope. An expansion of scope related to that bill. So it's actually extremely common for committees to report to the House under the rubric of the study of a particular piece of legislation, independently of the actual report of the legislation itself. So I mean, I can think of examples at FIWO, at Citizenship and Immigration,
Mr. Jenius, we'll get more
and at
examples
Justice where this
from you.
happened. Thanks.
Let's get the copy of your amendment first. I'll confer with the clerk.
I
Chair,
sent
on that
it
point of
into just to respond to that, Chair. I sent it into to your personal account as well as to the SECU account. So it should be there.
We'll just grab that. Just give us a minute
Okay.
then.
Thank you very much.
Ms. O'Connell?
Thanks. On that point of order, if Mr. Jenius is arguing that his amendment is part of C20, I would argue then it's also out of order because it is the context of his motion is outside of the scope, and it's actually on an amendment that is still or a motion as amended that is still before the committee. So he's off topic on numerous fronts. And the irony is that the Conservatives had suggested that this issue was not just a way to filibuster on dealing with government legislation. And I think they've made it very clear to Canadians that they are willing to use the rights of victims to filibuster government legislation. I think they've proven the point. But, Mr. Chair, my point of order is that the motion is out of order.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. I'll take that into account, and I'll just confer with the clerk once we get a copy of that from Mr. Jenius. We're just getting that translated, and we'll just be a couple minutes in recess.
So can we have like a 5-minute recess?
You want 5 minutes? Yep, 5-minute recess while we get that translated. It's all right. So, thank you for everybody's indulgence. It's been a little bit of a trying hour. Let's try and make the second hour not quite as trying. So, we're all trying. So, through many discussions, it's been decided that perhaps we should, for today, move on, and I will oversee Mr. Janice's ruling that on C20. Do we have unanimous consent to Ms. Ferrari?
I actually think I'm new to this committee. I don't normally sit on this committee, so this is a very interesting committee to sit on for the first time. I just want to acknowledge all the witnesses that have sat very patiently. Thank you. And I think I can find a compromise. I think actually everybody in the room, based on what I've witnessed, wants the exact same thing. So I think everybody wants to move forward immediately with C20, right? Like, let's get that done. We have these lovely people who have been extremely patient. You can come and teach my children how to be that patient. And they want to get on with it. But the reason I came, and I think there is an appetite, I hope that there's an appetite to, especially my female colleague across the way, that we have to investigate the Paul Bernardo transfer. That's why we're here, the rights of victims. And so if we
Point
could
of order,
have...
Mr. Chair?
I'm still on my point of order. So if we could have...
What's the point? This sounds like debate.
So
I'm sure my good colleagues will get to her point quickly.
Yeah, of course. So I'm saying 100% let's move forward with C20, get that done. But we cannot defend Paul Bernardo in this House of Commons. So I'm putting forward that we would have a unanimous consent, move forward with C20 right now, and that we remove what was put forward, that the minister not come, that we can have a unanimous consent on the sub-amendment that was put on the floor originally by my colleague, Mr. Lloyd, to ensure that the rights of victims are met. We'll remove the I believe, between my colleagues from the Bloc and the NDP and the Liberals, they didn't want the Minister of Public Safety.
Point of order, Mr.
So we
Chair.
can just ensure that the rights of victims are here and we're not protecting child killer, rapist Paul Bernardo.
Ms. O'Connell?
I don't know what that was, Mr. Chair. Was there a motion somewhere in there? And if so, could she repeat the actual text of her motion so that we can determine if it's in order or not?
Just at the end there, when you did say the motion you were looking for, Ms. Ferrari?
So I can send to the committee. So the revised with the Bernardo, a revised would be that the committee hold a 3-hour meeting with the following witnesses: the Commissioner of Correctional Service Canada, Ann Kelly, Deputy Minister Sean Tupper, the Federal Victims Ombudsman, representatives of the victims' families to discuss the transfer of Paul Bernardo from maximum security facility to a medium security facility. We pass that with unanimous consent and go right to C20 and get on with this.
Point of order. Mr. Chair, it's not, the motion isn't in order. We already voted on it. So the member opposite's motion would need to be, this could be a notice of motion, but it's not in order since we are currently on C20.
Just 1 second on all these points of order. I don't know. The clerk has informed me that if there is unanimous consent on that, we could go forward with that. So,
Clarification, Mr. Chair. So I am asking this committee for unanimous consent.
Point of
that
order, we already
bring-
voted.
So you want to protect Paul
Point of
Bernardo,
order,
just for the
Mr.
record.
Chair.
Thank
Point
you,
of
Ms.
order,
Ferrari.
Mr. Chair. If we are going to play that game, and the members opposite, we had the motion before us previously, in fact, that it was our members that brought forward. We were working collectively. But, Mr. Chair, if the members opposite didn't come prepared to deal with C20, then they should just let everyone know instead of trying to make a political show on horrific.
This is sounding like debate now. Is this your point of order? No, but I'm willing to.
But in
I'm
fairness,
willing to
Mr.
move
Chair,
on.
if you're going to allow other members to make very derogatory accusations about some members, right, Mr. Chair? We are trying to get to a place.
Let's debate this issue.
No,
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair,
Let's.
the motion was ruled out of
understand
order.
that, so I was- and you
Thank
have
you.
not received unanimous consent, so we will move on.
On the same point of order, Chair.
Make it quick, Mr. Jenius, please.
Sure, Chair. I mean, my colleague put forward a good faith attempt to come to a compromise. If we don't have a compromise, then I have a motion that's on the floor, and so I'm happy to speak to that. So I guess if we could have some clarity about exactly where we are, our goal
So
is
just a
to
minute, Mr.
get to a
Jenius.
point.
Because we're losing track a little bit. That was the one just before we took our break that we were getting
Yeah.
translation for. So has everybody received that?
It was sent to our emails.
It is. Everybody has received it to their emails? So you are correct, that is on the floor, Mr. Jenius. We left that off to get translation, so did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank
Point
you,
of
Chair.
order?
The goal of the Conservative
Mr. Jenius,
Party
just
at this
for a minute, we
committee
have a-
is to allow
Mr.
representatives
Jenius?
of families of the
Mr.
Bernardo
Jenius,
victims to come and tell
We
their
have a
stories.
point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I question if this motion is in order, given that we already voted on the subject of it.
Just on the same point of order, on what possible basis could
I
this
have
be
not
out of order?
recognized you yet, Mr. Jenius,
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry. Point of order.
Okay, the clerk is informing me because this is a motion to report back to the House. This is a new motion, so I have not ruled on this one yet, so I will say it's in order.
Mr. Chair, I challenge your ruling.
Not surprised by that, so we will call the vote.
Just clarification again, a no is you do not support the chair's ruling, a yes is you support the chair's ruling. Correct, Mr. Clerk?
Correct. The question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained?
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just a point of order. The member opposite was able to ask a question to the clerk about procedure, and the clerk answered directly.
Sorry, that was my fault. I should have
and-
jumped in there quicker, Mr. Jenius. Thanks for pointing that out, and I'll try and do a better job.
Okay. In
Mr.
past.
Jenius, I haven't recognized you yet either.
Okay. Point of order.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah.
Jenius.
On committees that I've been in the past, it's been relatively
order, there's
routine
no-
for committee
point of order.
members to be able to raise questions of procedure, and with the chair's permission, the clerk has weighed in.
Point
So
of
I don't think
order.
there's anything inappropriate about the clerk weighing in. I just kind of question the fact that, the fact is we have a situation in which
Point of order,
some
Mr.
of
Chair.
this
Janice,
is a
just
point of
hold off,
order, Ms.
please.
O'Connell. We have a situation
Janice,
where
thank you. I've heard your point.
chairs'
Mr.
rulings
O'Connell.
are being
Mr.
overruled
Janice.
even when they're obviously in order, and the clerk's not being
Mr.
able
Janice,
to weigh in. So
Please
that's a
respect
concern.
the chair. Ms. O'Connell,
Sorry, there's a motion to challenge the chair. There is no debate on that.
let's go to that vote. Is it anybody? Is it the will to have a recorded vote, or
Yes.
We can adopt the motion on division.
no? We'll go to a recorded vote.
Ms. O'Connell,
No.
Mr. MacDonald. No. Mr. Gair,
No.
Mr. Biddle,
No. I'm glad you
Mr.
can laugh
Shifke.
at this. No.
Mr. Lloyd,
Mr. Biddle, Mr. Janice, gentlemen, it's been a long afternoon. It's going to be a longer afternoon. Let's try to keep it civil. We all have our difference of opinions here. Let's not be talking back and forth across the table, please, to both of you. Thank you.
Mr. Lloyd,
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari,
Yes.
Mr. Guinness,
Sorry, we got a few mics on here. I'm sorry. Yes.
Madame Michaud,
Contre.
Mr. Julian,
No, contre.
7 contre, 3 en faveur.
Thank you. So we're just going to go right into C20 now, right?
Yes.
That fails. So we will now move into
Point of order?
C20.
Chair?
Mr. Janice, another point of order.
It's not a point of order, Chair.
Oh, I thought you
I
said
have a
point of
point
order.
of
No, I
order.
didn't say point of order.
Point of order over here.
Mr. Chair, can I just get some clarification? Who are the members on the Conservatives? Mr. Jennis voted last time, but Mr. Motz is the regular member. So who's being subbed in?
I'll confer with the clerk.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Connell, there has been notification sent that Mr. Janis is replacing Mr. Motz. That's the notice you got? Right now. Thank you. Mr. Janis, on a point of order? On a point of,
I'm requesting the floor.
okay, go ahead very quickly.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that the committee invite additional witnesses to appear in regard to Bill C-20, and that any new amendments to the bill be submitted to the clerk within 48 hours of the completion of the agreed upon witness meetings. That motion is being put forward in hopes that we can do further study on Bill C-20. I think further study would be useful in terms of setting the stage on this bill, but also in terms of allowing committee members to have broader conversations about some of the other issues in terms of the committee's agenda. As we get into this discussion of what the agenda of the committee will be going forward, it's important to note that it is always the tendency, I think, of government to want to prioritize the advancement of government legislation. That's obviously understandable. It wouldn't be government legislation if the government wasn't supportive of it. And it's the job of parliamentary committees to scrutinize that legislation, to review it, to consider amendments and possible improvements, to hear from various experts, and to determine its agenda in terms of how many experts it hears from on what matters and for what timeline. But also the committee needs to prioritize other issues before it. And in particular, this committee has been seized with, some members of this committee have been seized with the hope that we will actually be able to honor the desire of representatives of the families of victims of Paul Bernardo,
Point of
honor
order,
their
Mr. Chair.
request to be able to come and tell
Point
their
of order,
stories
Mr. Connell, just
before
one
the
moment,
committee.
please,
So
Mr.
these are the
Mr.
excuse
Janis.
me. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the member's motion is about expanding the study on C-20, then he's beginning outside of the scope of his motion. And I'd ask that you rule that he stay on the subject matter of his
I
motion.
will keep that in mind. We are discussing C-20 right now, Mr. Janis. If you could keep your comments towards that, would be appreciated by all.
Yeah, Chair. Just with great respect, I'll certainly fully stay within the rules that are established. And I suspect there'll be other members that want to speak on this motion as well. The rules prescribe that there's a certain breadth in terms of ability of a member to address the topic of the motion. And in that context, I do want to be clear about the rationale for having brought forward this motion. Why have Conservatives put forward this motion? Fundamentally, what is our goal in terms of trying to shape the agenda of this committee?
Mr. Janis, just one moment, please. And
Yep.
I'm not sure Mr. Julian might have the same point where I was just talking with the clerk. Your point of order, Mr. Julian?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the intention is to provoke a filibuster to delay consideration of Bill C-20, I think there are two considerations, Mr. Chair. First off, of course, Mr. Janis would be aware of both the rule of repetition and staying within the scope of his motion, and that will mean repeated points of order, because he does have a tendency to repeat and to fall outside of his motion. Secondly, though, I do think we've now had the witnesses before us for 2 consecutive meetings. If his intention, and if the Conservative intention is to filibuster the rest of the meeting, it would seem to me that it's being inconsiderate of the witnesses, and that we should contemplate releasing them again. The cost of this meeting and the previous meeting, both of which were filibustered by Conservatives, it's been in the tens of thousands of dollars. All of our witnesses before us have important jobs that they are taken away from to become witnesses for this committee. and for clause by clause on C20. And so I find it very unfortunate that their time is being wasted and the public's time is being wasted and resources are being wasted on this filibuster that really could be resolved offline, I think, over the next few days.
Thank you. And we did have, that is exactly what was going through my head, Mr. Julian, as you raised your hand. Now, I can't read minds. I wish I could. So I don't know exactly what the intentions are. I do, listen, I am going to speak to the witnesses right now. I tried to speak to you earlier, but we got some distracted. Thank you. Thank you very, very much for being here again today. I haven't even had a chance to introduce you all yet. So thank you for being here last time. Thank you, I'm going to mention again, for missing the Blue Jay game for this great work you're doing here tonight. It is much appreciated. So I know it must be frustrating to sit here, but I don't know what to do exactly, Mr. Julian, because I don't know the intentions.
Chair,
Janice?
yeah, I can speak to that and hopefully shed some light for Mr. Julian. I don't think his intervention was a point of order, but I didn't object. I thought I didn't have a problem with allowing him to.
Perhaps towards
Yeah,
that?
yeah, absolutely, and I have the floor, so I'm happy to address
Yes.
my intentions. Our intention on this side of the house is to firmly insist that the representatives of the family members of Paul Bernardo's victims not be silenced by parliamentarians who think their voice coming to committee is inconvenient. That is
Mr. Janice,
my
thank you.
intention.
Thank you.
Today,
I'll give you the
and
floor.
that is our
I'll
intention.
give you the floor again because it is
Thank
your
you.
turn. I am going to make a decision because it's my decision to make. And just seeing how this has gone for an hour and 15 minutes, I will let the witnesses go today. If what you're looking for is consensus, I don't think we're going to get it today. So I think 45 minutes. We haven't been able to reach it in an hour 15. I apologize very much to the witnesses. If anybody strongly disagrees,
Mr. Chair, if I
just before you pack up too quickly, Ms. Ferry, as a point of order.
in one more chance and one more lost hope, again, as a new
Oh,
person.
I'm
is
sorry.
there-
You're right.
you-
Sorry, Ms. Ferry. Sorry. Mr. Biddle, you are correct, and I apologize to you.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair. As we're going through this, as this is now hour 4 of using a horrific situation in my community, I'm curious if it could be answered for us and it would shed some light on things. Has anyone spoken to Mr. Danson or the victims' families? I know we've heard from friends of
Okay,
friends.
this is
but
turning into debate, everyone. Mr. Biddle, thank you for your point of order. Ms. Ferry, you did have
Just
a
a
point
quick
of order.
point of order, if I could call one more time unanimous consent that we approve that we're going to study this so that we can have the rights of victims. We can go right to C20. It's a unanimous consent. I'm putting it on the floor for the second time. I think
we
we all
have-
want the same thing because Mr.
Thank
Julian
you,
is
Ms.
exactly
Ferry.
right.
Do we have unanimous consent? No, we do not. So, thank you, witnesses. I wish one of you two had my phone number. You could text me the score, but enjoy what's left of the game. We'll see you soon. Enjoy. Have a nice Thanksgiving weekend. Just let them get out. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I apologize. I forgot you're. Okay, let's get back to, well, I'd say get back to order, but we really haven't had a lot of order, so let's get back to something. Ms. O'Connell, I think we left with you on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Sorry, Chair, just a point of order. Can you move an adjournment motion on a point of order? My
I
understanding
don't know with that, Mr. Jennings. I'm going to check with my friend to the left
Okay,
here.
yeah,
and
my
let you
understanding
know.
is you need the
In
floor
fairness,
to
I
move an
didn't
adjournment
say a
motion.
point of order. I asked to be
No,
added to the list.
I had the floor,
He did
and I
have
had
the
never
floor.
ceded it.
So, Mr. Jennings, you did have the floor. I'm sorry, I thought it was a point of order, Mr. O'Connell, but he did have the floor. So, I can definitely get you on the list. Right now we have, let's just check the list. Right now we have Mr. Jennings has the floor. Mr. Lloyd has raised his hand wanting to speak. And Ms. O'Connell. Is there anybody else at this point in time? Okay, thank you. We'll continue then with Mr. Jennings.
Thank you very much, Chair. although I've been trying to move various motions, I feel that I've actually barely had a chance to sort of speak in a extended period of time to actually put on the record what the case we're making is. And so, notwithstanding the call for adjournment, I would like to be able to just very clearly do that. Conservatives have been putting before this committee the view that following the transfer of Paul Bernardo
Point of order.
to medium security.
Please, that's
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I will speak to the motion, and I will speak to the rationale for why the motion is important.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. First, could we have the most current motion in terms of extending the study for C20, which is what I understood?
Well, we'll be able to sit around and chat some more because we'll ask Mr. Janice if he could send us that motion, please. The latest one we don't have, Mr. Janice?
I could. I've read it out verbally, so there's no requirement for it to be. I mean,
I would like to know what is the motion on the floor.
Is it okay if he
Sure.
reads it again?
Shall
or
I
should I
just
get
read it
ready?
again?
Sure.
Mr. Janice, can you just make
Yeah.
sure you speak when I'm addressing you, please? Thank you.
It's that the committee invite additional witnesses to appear in regards to C20, and that any new amendments to the bill be submitted to the clerk within 48 hours of completion of the agreed-upon witness meetings.
Thank you. Then, point of order?
Ms. O'Connell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then I'd argue again that the debate that is about to happen needs to stick to the motion that the member himself moved, which is extending the meeting for C20. And I would argue any other committee business is outside of the scope of his own motion.
Thank
So
you, Ms. O'Connell.
On the point of order, Mr.
Just
Chair.
let me finish, Mr.
Sure.
Janice. I will do my very best to keep it to that. I can't make him move his lips to my, but I will do my best. That is your right and prerogative too, Ms. O'Connell. Do you have a point of order? Point of order, Ms. Ferrari?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not 100% sure on this, but Mr. Biddle had asked or addressed the committee if we'd heard from victims' families. And I do have the letters here from the victims' families, and I'm happy to read them into the record. It's why I'm here. I'm not going to stop saying that. So if I could read it into the record, because he
Point
did
of
ask.
order.
He did ask the committee for that.
Ms. O'Connell?
It's debate.
I know.
Can I
No,
ask to
I don't
table this
think-
to committee?
Point of order.
I think that would be out of order as we're talking about C20 right now, Ms. Ferrari. Well, she can. She didn't.
I would just, he asked, Mr. Biddle asked, so
All right.
I'm
Mr.
saying.
Janice has the floor right now, so should we continue on with debate? Did you want to be, a point of order from Mr. Lloyd?
I'm going to request unanimous consent. The witnesses have gone, so maybe discussion on C20 might be pointless at this point, and so I think we could use this time. So I'm asking for unanimous consent that we discuss a potentially revised motion that we can all accept in the remaining 40 minutes or 30 minutes of this meeting, so that we can move on to C20. Okay, thank you.
No
Just
unanimous
looking-
consent. Okay, Mr. Janice, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just say briefly. I think. Yeah.
If I could just remind you, we do need you to stick closely to C20,
Yeah.
please.
Absolutely, Chair. I will stick within the rules, which are to speak to the motion as well as the context of the motion. I know those
you.
rules very well, and they don't require me to reference C20 in, say, every sentence.
Nope.
The debates in the House, you'll
Point
see
down, Mr.
members that that draw on philosophical texts
Point
and go on a
down.
great length to set the stage for
Joe has point of order.
subsequent points. So.
Juste pour être certaine, est-ce qu'on parle d'une nouvelle?
Are we now talking about a new motion? Or I'm lost track.
Read it out twice. Did you get the last time he read it out? Miss
Monsieur-
O'Connell asked for it to be read out, and he did read it out again.
Et est-ce qu'on l'a en français?
Do we have the French?
But I thought the translation would have come through. Do you want to do it one more time, Miss Michaud? Well, hopefully, tell me if the translation comes through.
Ben-
Sorry, Mr. Janice, could you read your motion one more time, and hopefully...
Yes,
S'il
I.
veut qu'on vote sa motion, il faudrait qu'elle soit dans les deux langues officielles. là. Ce serait la
Sorry,
moindre
I'm not
des
getting...
If you want us to vote, we need to have it in writing in both official languages.
Well, we're not voting on it right now.
Yeah.
Do we need to get that? You thought you said
There,
we can just
there.
do it.
Just on
Mr.
if a point
Janice,
of order,
just
if I
a
may,
second.
Chair. Yeah. Okay.
Didn't you say we just do it? procedurally, we don't need it in writing right now. We can just do it verbally. That's what the clerk is telling me, Ms. Michaud. So go ahead, Mr. Janice.
Would members like me to read it again, though? I'm happy to.
Did you want it read one more time, Ms. Michaud, for clarification? You sure?
Okay. All right. So if there's no need to read the motion again, I will be brief if I am not interrupted, but I will be longer if I am interrupted, because I would like to be able to quickly get the ideas I want to get out there. Which is simply that my colleagues who are regular members of this committee have been trying to work towards a solution that would allow one meeting before C20 is completed, one meeting to allow representatives of victims' families to tell their story before this committee. And we have members of the Liberal Party who are no doubt deeply embarrassed by their failure here and their failures on crime more broadly. And so they are trying to silence representatives of the families of the victims. And that is a crying shame. And Conservatives will not apologize for standing up for victims' families, for standing with victims' families, and for insisting that they be heard, and for using the tools and the leverage we have to ensure
Mr.
that they are
Janice,
heard.
we have a point of order,
This is the
please.
stand we've
Mr.
taken,
Janice?
and we will stand.
Mr. Janice,
Yeah.
Ms. O'Connell?
And
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
done,
Chair.
actually, Chair.
But
I'm done.
once again, the member is off of his own subject matter of his own motion. So can we stick to the motion at hand, which is debating whether or not there should be an extension of the study of C20?
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell, for your point of order. I do believe, Mr. Janice, you say you're finished?
Yeah, I'm. Well, maybe just to make it simpler, Chair.
Just keep it back on topic, please.
Pardon me.
Please keep it-
Since I've now said my piece, I'll happily accept the adjournment, and I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, trust me, I do. Okay, do we have unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting? Yes? Seeing unanimous consent, I call the meeting adjourned.